Power.
Resistance.
These concepts have been with us throughout human history, and their presence has never been felt more by our generation than within our current social and political climate.
The election of Donald Trump.
The Women's March on Washington.
Racial discrimination and police brutality.
Black Lives Matter.
The Dakota Access Pipeline.
Standing Rock.
These conditions, movements, and events of our contemporary American moment occupy spaces of tension between power and resistance.
What you are about to see are stories that exemplify this tension and the struggle within.
The issues we face today are not the result of a single president or administration. These issues have persisted throughout the history of our nation.
With this in mind, we hope that these stories empower you to act and empower you to resist.
Stay strong, stay the course, and stay tuned for Resistance.
I'm Roxana Cadena.
And I'm Ace Wilson.
Our first segment details the experience of undocumented students in higher education.
Mariela Diaz, Dan Sanford, and our very own Roxana Cadena cover the story of Stephanie, an undocumented student here in Washington State. Professor Grace Huerta also shares her thoughts on immigration issues and the realities undocumented students face daily.
Thank you for joining us. Now let's go ahead and watch our first documentary.
My name is Grace Huerta, and I'm a faculty member at the Evergreen State College, and I teach educational policy and ESL. Following the election of Trump, it was really fantastic to bring together this coalition of faculty, students, and community members in a really short period of time. Well, of course, we would love the college to have agreed to designate our institution as a sanctuary campus. And we like to think that through our petition work, which we gained over 800 signatures, we are hoping that through the power of our community that the cause will continue to articulate exactly what they plan to do. And we are still on that path. Our students need to know, hey, is this a safe place? Hey, will the college stand by us? Hey, will the faculty and student affairs, will they come forward in times of need? And we have identified that we need faculty and staff training so that we know how to support our students. I do think over the course of time and many conversations and the coalitions coming together that we are now hopefully getting things done.
I'm Stephanie Flores, I'm 24, and I am a undocumented student here in Washington State. When I was a junior in high school, we started applying for schools and scholarships in FAFSA, and I was not aware that I did not qualify for FAFSA. My parents and my immediate family were not aware of any ways to help me. So I went to Wenatchee Valley College, and I got a scholarship playing soccer, and they covered 75% of my tuition from the scholarship, and I just had to come up with the resting 25%. It was only for a year, so when that last quarter, which passed a year, came up and I came out as a lesbian to my parents, I got cut off completely from the family, from any funds, from them providing any assistance for me to finish the last 3 classes. 15 credits I had left to graduate with my AA. So I dropped out, and ever since then I haven't stopped working. 5 years later, I am trying to get back into school. So I'm determined to get back. And even though I have some obstacles facing me today, I feel like, all of the years and all of the time that I have spent outside of school is more of a motivation to get back into school and to finish my education and finish what I started and further it and become the teacher that I would like to become. These schools could provide that assistance, that extra assistance to just help them be informed and know what schools provide what for what people, and especially with scholarships, because You know, there are specific scholarships for undocumented students. Sometimes undocumented students, not just them, you know, any student in general, they don't have access to laptops, or they don't have, you know, access to different things that sometimes people take for granted. If you want to further your education, there's always a way. And if you have the drive and you are striving to accomplish all your aspirations and become what you want to be and help this world out for it to be better, then don't stop. Keep pushing and push through the obstacles and face all these obstacles strong.
I don't always know the status of many of my students in terms of their citizenship. However, if they self-support, over the years I have had students who say, like, my parents, you know, brought me here when I was very young, or I came with extended family, and as a result have been living under the radar for many, many years. And it's really amazing to see some of these students and how they persist and they keep going. It's really powerful to see students just becoming more strong, I'd say, over the years.
Wow, that is something I don't have to struggle with, so it's really nice to see someone with personal experience speak for themselves.
I agree. It's important to have first-hand accounts because mainstream media often frames stories in a way where we don't hear their complexities. If you're an undocumented student and are looking for more information, visit evergreen.edu/equity/undocumented.
Up next, we have a PSA about the Emma Goldman Youth and Homeless Outreach Project, or EGHOP, a grassroots, all-volunteer-run organization that provides emergency supplies, services, and resources to the homeless and low-income populations living on the streets of Olympia, Washington.
Let's right into this PSA by Caitlin Roach and Evan Bedlion.
Looking for ways to help the homeless youth in Olympia? EGHOP gives you this chance. EGHOP is a local volunteer-based organization that brings hope to the homeless youth of Olympia. By donating socks, beanies, and medical supplies, you can put a smile on a youth's face. Help those in need.
They also accept donations, which you could drop off at Traditions Cafe or the Interfaith Work Shelter.
Coming up next, looking for some much-needed comic relief to combat the negative effects of dire news? Here is Maggie Harris with your latest weather report.
In weather news today, the eastern seaboard has been blanketed by the largest nor'easter storm since last week, virtually shutting down businesses, public services, and travel all over the East Coast. Major airports are closed as far south as Atlanta and as far north as Boston due to the storm, which has dropped as much as 84 inches of snow in the past 12 hours, with winds gusting as high as 80 miles per hour. At least 173 deaths are blamed on the storm. Let's go to our correspondent in the field. A White House spokesperson has released this statement. "We are relieved that the warming climate trends of the past century have come to an end with this storm, putting an end to the fake news and very fake science of global warming." Staying at his underground bunker at Mar-a-Lago, President Trump tweeted, "There is no longer any need for the Paris Accord. Weather Channel, big threat to the United States. Sad." Meanwhile, polar bears are dying for some reason. Well, you know what? Who needs those things? They're terrifying. Have you seen all the ones at the zoos instead of our own grizzly bears? They're coming into America and they're taking our bears' jobs. Now back to Ace and Roxana.
So much for our vacation plans.
Our next documentary by Philip Robertson and Steven Zuloff details the experiences of students of color here at the Evergreen State College and why they chose to attend Evergreen.
The documentary will explore problems some students experience and ways in which faculty and non-POC students can become more aware of how much space they take up in the classroom.
The reason why I decided to attend Evergreen was mostly because it was marketed as kind of like a non-competitive kind of school, and basically in the way that they don't really have like letter grades, or there's not really a focus on trying to get students to work against each other, but rather work together.
It's super freeform and interdisciplinary, and you can pick your own major and like make your own classes, and that just sounded very appealing to me at the time of not even wanting to do school.
I came here specifically to a non-traditional school because I believe it gave me enough room to delve into my ideas and academic interest.
Being a person of color at Evergreen is difficult just because it's a mostly predominantly white school, which makes it hard to find your people.
There's no instruction guides, there's no guidelines, there's no manual for it, so being a student of color, it's kind of difficult in that sense.
First coming here, it can feel at least isolation. You don't see a lot of yourself in the teachers or the classes, and you really do have to look hard to find other people who share the same experiences as you.
There's not many resources that are thrown to students of color, so you have to, as students of color, we have to basically storm the board of trustees or raise a ruckus to get any form of attention. So
you watch a lot more than you talk, which I don't know, it's nice, but also everybody needs to shut up sometimes, but you can't tell them to.
Sometimes it can feel like being a percentage or a statistic.
Non-POC people, like people in seminars, they say a lot of stuff. They say a lot of stuff. And it gets tiring after a while. I think that the biggest problem that students of color have at Evergreen is not feeling welcome, in the classroom and on campus, and people putting up white supremacist flyers every now and then, the typical.
Really, with anything else, talking about it. If people don't talk about it, if the admin, faculty, or the staff aren't talking to the students, then they're not gonna know what the needs are. So that's basically the most bottom line, baseline step is talking about it. And you can't assume and you can't pretend you know, and you can't just try to dish out what you think is a good solution to something you didn't even know about. So first step is talking about it.
Being willing to engage in the most uncomfortable situations and being willing to sit in the most unconvincing arenas so that we can actually go into what's making this institution so great, what's making this institution not meet the needs of people of color. So it does take the willingness to, make time in the day to hear what's out there.
The fact that there's not many of us, the fact that the school doesn't really do much to accommodate us.
Faculty should have the vocabulary and the rhetoric when talking about students of color and retention rates and stuff like that. They should be aware that, I don't even know if some of the faculty are consciously aware that most of their classes are white, and that the very few people of color or students of color that are in their classes are facing I'd say isolation in class, and sometimes are pushed out of these classes, and sometimes the faculty won't even know.
So I actually have a lot of volunteer experience.
You do? Do you want to share?
Yeah, I sure do. So my first time volunteering was when I was 7 years old. I helped my grandma plant turnips. They were really delicious and they were scrumptious. And I used to volunteer in high school. I went and I volunteered at my local food bank, and that was really wonderful. It was really, really powerful to be able to give back to a community that has given so much to me. What about you, Roxana?
My first time volunteering wasn't so good. I was there by choice, and all the other people there were there by force, and it was really weird. I felt uncomfortable. But other than that, the other volunteering opportunities have been really great, like making hiking trails in Wenatchee.
Oh, wow. Well, that's wonderful. I really recommend people volunteer. You can change someone's life just by volunteering.
Up next, we welcome activist, Evergreen student Miriam Padilla into our studios for a live interview with Stone Mills to talk about former political prisoner Nestora Salgado.
She'll talk about her involvement in the release of Salgado, the hardships along the way, and why it's important to resist.
Hi, I'm Stone Mills. In 2012, Nestora Salgado, a community activist in southern Mexico, organized a community police force to protect her hometown from drug cartels after corrupt authorities failed to do so themselves. Later, Salgado was arrested and jailed under erroneous charges of kidnapping. After spending 21 months in jail, Salgado was finally released in 2016 after a long campaign for her innocence. Joining me live today is Miriam Padilla, an activist and Evergreen student who was involved in campaigning for Salgado's release. Miriam, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I just want to start off, what organizations do you work with?
I'm a member of the Freedom Socialist Party, which is a socialist feminist organization in Seattle.
Great. And could you elaborate on the circumstances of Nestora's imprisonment?
Yeah, well, she was arrested under trumped-up charges of kidnapping, like you mentioned. She was able to arrest a public official who was caught stealing from a deceased. And so she said, well, he committed a crime, he's going to go to prison for it and has to have a trial like any other person. But what the Mexican government did was they sent the army to rescue that man who was never charged of anything, and an investigation wasn't launched, and arrested her instead.
See. And could you explain some of the obstacles you faced in ensuring Nestora's security?
Yeah, during the campaigning process, every time we were able to achieve a goal or move towards a step where we were able to see Nestora come out of prison, they attacked her directly, physically, by denying her, clean water, cooked meat. They were forcing her to eat raw meat. She was being held in solitary confinement. The lights were on 24/7, and was only giving about 30 to an hour per day to leave her cell.
And if possible, could you give a message to our viewers about why it's important to resist?
Yeah, it's critically important to resist, especially in this era of Trumpism, because here we have people who are being held against their will for bravely standing up against basic human rights. I mean, from being able to publicly speak to defending rights that really affect all of us. Maybe not directly, but they do indirectly, and sooner rather than later will be affecting us directly. Nestora is just one example of a political prisoner who was lucky enough to be able to be released, but there are over 500 political prisoners in Mexico right now, and several here in the United States alone. And it's also important to realize that Nestora's case has broader implications from police brutality. Here we have the Black Lives Matter movement, and also environmental justice, which really resonates with the Dakota Access Pipeline and everything that has been going on in Dakota the last few months. So it's really an issue of building solidarity internationally and building it in a united front with organizations from different backgrounds and people who are either socialist or anarchist or, student activist of color, which is critically important as well.
Great. Miriam, that's about all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Back to Ace and Roxana.
I'm so glad that Nestora was released. That was a fascinating example of resisting corrupt systems.
It takes a lot of courage to stand for justice, even though there are so many systems in place that are actively working against it.
Our final documentary by Juan Carlos Duran and Alex Markley and Yusef Ramini explores resisting Trump on campus, immigration, educational rights, and the necessity for the Evergreen State College to support students on campus.
How will Trump's immigration and educational reforms affect access to higher education? And what does this mean for non-traditional, non-binary students?
And so the question becomes, how many is enough and how many is too many, would you say? What's the ideal level of immigration? For immigrants and immigration, famously, we're all descended from immigrants. The question
then becomes, what is the fascination with immigration by supporting a racially targeted ban against Muslims and migrant workers? The economic advantage may not be clearly drawn in the sand as people believe it to be. It is an integrated part of the economic model to which society runs on. Cheap labor has been historically an American tradition. The racism justified by the current administration is in place because they believe immigrants have an economic advantage, such as the opportunity to work in high-intensity labor, low-wage paying jobs, which is not enough for any American to have a middle-class standard of living. The migrant worker also faces deportation, no health care, no rights to negotiate terms, discrimination, and physical and sexual abuse. It is not the cheap labor of destitute people that are stealing jobs from Americans, but rather the full mechanization of factories and outsourcing which remove these opportunities. There is clear evidence to suggest that this argument against migrant workers is a false dichotomy.
The flow of immigrants into the country, if you include like illegal immigrants, for instance, coming in annually, is less than it was before the Great Recession, annually coming in. So as a result of that, it actually goes in favor of my point, which is the more immigrants, the faster the growth. Okay.
The child labor law in the U.S. is pretty good, except when it comes to agriculture. And then it has a big gaping hole. U.S. law allows children to work in agriculture at far younger ages for unlimited hours outside of school in much more dangerous conditions than any other sector.
Without education, you cannot have the American dream. Some people say the American dream is dead. I don't disagree with them. The American dream is dead, but we're going to make it bigger and better and stronger than ever before. But again, without education, you can't do that.
Have you had any personal experience with the Pell Grant?
Not personal experience, but certainly friends and students with whom I've worked.
So you have no personal experience with college financial aid or management of higher education. Mrs. DeVos, then let's start with the basics. Do you support protecting federal taxpayer dollars from waste, fraud, and abuse?
Absolutely.
Oh, good. So do I. Because now we all know that President-elect Trump's experience with higher education was to create a fake university, which resulted in his paying a $25 million to students that he cheated.
Disorder erupted as protesters clashed with police, yet no violence was brought upon them. The unruly crowd was over 9 black students attending Little Rock Central High School. Historically, the integration of racial minorities has never been a popular sentiment to the American public. On the other side of the country, Chicanos and Latinos were working toward their own form of stability by earning the right for an education. In these examples, the courts ruled in favor of these groups organizing for their own self-determination.
I think a lot of our, the focus of the Equity Council, there's a few. One is certainly for our work, all of our work across the campus to be more student-centered and to be thinking about what is it that the students need to be successful.
And I do think that the other piece of it too is thinking of support not as like a reaction, not like as a need, but something that's already in place before a student even tells you that they need support.
So one of the things that students have really asked us to do is to help us to learn how to bring their racialized, gendered, raced, embodied selves, their whole selves to this campus, and how to have their whole selves be expressed and supported in what they want to do in their educational journey.
And I think one of the things we need to do is give students the resources to be the fighters, or to at least be able to thrive even in a tough community.
That's all we have for you today.
What you have just witnessed are stories of resistance,
An undocumented student,
volunteer opportunities,
people of color who attend Evergreen,
a political prisoner.
These stories have highlighted voices you may not have heard before, challenged your ways of thinking,
and hopefully inspired you to do what you can to resist the injustices of our society.
Resistance did not start with Donald Trump, and nor should it end with his presidency.
Resistance must be maintained and reinforced, held dear and held sacred if we are to fight injustice.
If we are to stand up for those who cannot stand alone.
If we seek to create a society in which oppression has been destroyed and all the rights of all humans are recognized.
And for now, stay strong.
Stay the course.
Now go create your own story of resistance.